Wave at the people on the bridges. They love it. Oh, I say they love it. You are in London, you wave at a stranger, I cannot guarantee that will be the same hand gesture they give back. We will start with this building on our right. That is, of course, the Houses of Parliament. To give it its official name, it's the new Palace of Westminster. If this is the new palace, then there must have been an old Palace of Westminster. And there was, it belonged to the monarchy until Henry VIII decided to move across the road into the much larger Whitehall Palace. When he did, he handed the building over to Parliament. Parliament in this country is made up of two houses: the House of Commons, 650 publicly elected MPs who debate laws and legislations, and the House of Lords, made up of the lords and ladies appointed by the Queen to ratify those legislations. If you see any politicians outside today, do feel free to give them a wave. Whether you want to use 5 fingers or just one is entirely up to you. You'll see some canopies on the side of the building. Those are the dining areas for the houses. They're split in half. One half is red, the other half is green. Westminster Bridge, we just went underneath, was green. Lambeth Bridge ahead of us is red. If you ever watch them on television, the House of Commons have green benches, the House of Lords have red benches. The reason for this colour coordination is because the two houses are kept separate at all times. Separate chambers, separate dining areas, either used to use separate bridges to use separate entrances into the building. And the reason for all this separation is to avoid corruption, which we know works very well, because there's absolutely no corruption in Parliament whatsoever. So what happened to the old palace in 1834? There were 2 cartloads of tally sticks that needed to be destroyed. They were sent down to the basement stoves to be burnt, and burnt they were, along with the rest of the building, unintentionally of course. With the old palace destroyed by fire, a new one had to be built. The one we have today, completed in 1859, designed by architect Charles Barry to a neo-Gothic style. Made up of 3 towers, the tower closest to us, the Victoria Tower, home to the Parliamentary Archives. To avoid a repeat of what happened to the old palace, they built a chimney into this one, and it is that central tower, which has a very creative name of the Central Tower. I know, very clever. And on the end there, we of course have Big Ben's home, because Big Ben, not the name of the clock tower, name of the 13.5 ton bell on the inside. In fact, the clock tower did just used to be called the Clock Tower. They do like a clever name there over at the House of Parliament, but it was renamed the Elizabeth Tower in 2012 to mark the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. So why is the bell on the inside? At least for our sake then, his name wasn't Richard. Over on our right, the white building there is County Hall. Used to belong to the Greater London Council, the GLC. They were abolished by Margaret Thatcher. She was the head of a Conservative government. The GLC at the time was led by Ken Livingstone, who was Labour. Already a bit of a rivalry. Reached a peak by 1986 when Ken Livingstone was a bit cheeky. Unemployment rate in the UK, right across the river from Parliament. That didn't go down too well with Margaret Thatcher. She decided she had enough. These days in front of County Hall though, we of course have the London Eye. That's that big wheel on the right. Now the London Eye is not a Ferris wheel. If anyone tries to tell you it is, you can be very smug about it and tell them they're wrong. It's a cantilevered observation wheel. Cantilever just being a fancy way of saying supported from one side. The 135 metre tall structure was originally built in a horizontal position, parallel to the water, and the largest cranes in the world were used to hoist it up into that vertical position in time for the new millennium in the year 2000. That makes the London Eye 22 years old this year, not to make any of you feel old, but that means it's older than me. If you have never been bored enough to count how many pods there are on the London Eye, don't worry, I have. The answer is 32, one for each borough of Greater London. It was part of a design competition to design a new landmark to celebrate the new millennium, and it came second place. I know, apparently there was something even better, but British Airways loved the design so much they decided to put forward the £75 million themselves to have it built. Originally supposed to be a temporary structure lasting just 5 years, it proved so popular and, more importantly to some people, made so much money, it was decided to make it a permanent attraction here in London. But somewhere around here is a building that looks like a steam train. Yeah, don't worry if you can't see it, none of them really do, but it is supposed to be that glass building on the left of Charing Cross station. There are 3 bridges going into Charing Cross. In the middle, the Hunger Buildings, pavilions, landmarks, and sculptures built there. When the festival ended, Churchill became Prime Minister again. He said, no, not for me, had the entire site demolished. Festival Hall, that's the building on our right, with the green roof. It's a great one listed example of Art Deco architecture these days is home to the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Nowadays, the South Bank Centre is also made up of the Hayward Gallery, the Purcell Room and the Queen Elizabeth Hall. Conveniently for me, they put the names of these buildings up in giant letters on the side, makes my job much easier. For the next bridge we're coming up to, this is Waterloo Bridge, the second Waterloo Bridge, the original completed in 1817, named to commemorate the then recent battle. Wasn't very successful. To try and make the money back they spent on building it, they implemented a toll, and everyone responded to that by saying, well, okay, we'll go along to the next bridge and cross the river for free. And so they did, but this Waterloo Bridge has been far more successful. Completed during the Second World War, as most men were away fighting, construction was completed by a mainly female workforce, thus earning it the nickname of the Ladies' Bridge. It's probably no coincidence then it's the only bridge across the Thames completed on time and under budget. And the building on our right is a bit like the railway station according to Prince Charles. He's not a fan of the useless architecture of the National Theatre. If you are a fan of theatre, not a fan of expensive theatre tickets, then the National is the place for you. Tickets there, including ones for front row seats, had a start with a visit at £15. We have crossed the border into the City of London. I know, you probably thought you were in the City of London the whole time, but you haven't. You've been in the City of Westminster. City of London is the area in the distance with the funny shaped skyscrapers, the oldest part of London where the Romans settled in the middle of the 1st century. Originally a city entirely surrounded by a wall, when the population grew they spilled over and moved to the neighbouring City of Westminster. City of London, area for commerce, City of Westminster, the area for royalty. It was decided the two should not be mixed, where modern London is made up of a combination of the two, Greater London made up of the 32 surrounding boroughs. The City of London has its own police force, its own taxi service, and even has its own Lord Mayor who once a year invites the Queen to step over into the city as she needs special permission to do so. But the reason why the skyscrapers are such funny shapes is because of this building on our left, St Paul's Cathedral. By law, St Paul's has to be visible from 13 certain points around London, so any time a skyscraper is built that is taller and may obstruct the view, it is built at an angle or in a funny shape, so panoramic corridors can remain upkept, the cathedral can remain visible from those 13 points. We're coming up to the Blackfriars Bridges now. This is Blackfriars Road Bridge. If you have a look at the columns on the bridge, you'll see there are some birds sculpted into them. Birds on this side, freshwater birds. Birds on the other side of the bridge are saltwater birds. That is because this is where the Victorians believed the freshwater and the saltwater of the River Thames met. They got their calculations slightly wrong. It's a bit further up the river behind us near Richmond. It does make some very decorative bridge columns anyway. Going back to St Paul's Cathedral though, you'll get a better view of it on the left in a moment once we come out from underneath these bridges. It's the 5th St Paul's. This one was completed in 1711. The one before it was destroyed in the Great Fire of London. This one was designed by Sir Christopher Wren, the only architect to see his cathedral completed. It took 35 years to construct. And it was already controversial enough being a domed cathedral, usually associated with the Catholic Church and what was, at the time, a very Protestant England. But it was almost even more controversial because originally Christopher Wren wanted to put a giant golden pineapple on top of it. In 1711 in England, pineapples were a sign of wealth. And not just giant golden ones, the actual fruits themselves. An original. The original didn't last very long, and actor in the production Henry VIII decided it was a good idea to fire a live cannon in a wooden building with a thatched roof. Yeah, I think you can work out how that ended. So when they built the second Globe Theatre, they made that roof out of tile so that one wouldn't burn down. Didn't last much longer. The Puritans came along, decided they wanted to destroy everything that was fun. They banned theatre altogether, had the Globe torn down. We went a few hundred years over here in London until actor and director Sam Wanamaker came over from Hollywood looking for a monument to Shakespeare, and he found nothing. He was quite disappointed, so he started up a project to build a replica of the original. To keep it true to the original, as many traditional construction methods and materials were used. No power tools used, it's all held together by wooden pegs. Even got special permission to give it a thatched roof, making it a unique building in London, as thatched roofs were outlawed after the Great Fire. Found to be a catalyst for the spread of the flames. The building coming up on the right with the red windows and the fairy lights, that's the Anchor Pub, one of London's oldest pubs. Many famous people have been there. Charles Dickens went there, Dr. Johnson who wrote Dictionary went there, Samuel Pepys watched the Great Fire around some of that crowd there, and Tom Cruise filmed something impossible there too. Award-winning fish and chips at the Anchor, so if you're looking for the best fish and chips in London, that is supposedly where you'll find it. It was even used by pirates and smugglers. Speaking of pirates and smugglers, if you continue looking to your right on the other side of this bridge, you will see a pirate ship. That pirate ship is even older than the Globe Theatre, as it was built in the 1970s. Yes, it is another replica, but the scaffolding is original. That is a replica of Francis Drake's Golden Hind. In 1577, Francis Drake set sail in search of treasure, and he found it. Quite a lot of it, in fact, courtesy of the Spanish and the Portuguese. As you can imagine, they were not very happy when he stole it off them. So they lined up their fleet ready to capture him. But he said, I know a shortcut. Got that shortcut slightly wrong. In fact, he gave her enough treasure she could pay off that debt 3 times over. As you can imagine, she was very happy with that. Made him Sir Francis Drake in 1581. Needless to say, we should see one of the Queen's Day Sea and pushing up. Looking to your right and then look up, you will see the Shard. Not only the tallest building in London, not only the tallest building in the UK, but the tallest building in all of Western Europe. Designed by architect Hms Belfast, it will make 309 metres tall, with estimated 9 metres. There are offices, a restaurant, pretentious 7-star hotels, and some really expensive Apex House on the top of the Shard, £6.5 million. And for that heavy price tag, you have the luxury of not being allowed to open your window, as it ruins the look of the building. Yeah, probably not really worth it. But coming up ahead of us, if you can see it, it might be camouflaged too well, that is the HMS Belfast. Named after the city it was built in the same docks as the Titanic, but it had a far more successful career than that ship. Some of the Shard Halls fired some of the first shots at D-Day landing, circa the Korean War, and it was supposed to be sold for scrap. But the Imperial War Museum, they stepped in, they won it as an auction for the bargain price of £1, which really upsets me because it means I spent more on my lunch today than they did on an entire warship. They towed it here to the Thames, opened it up as a floating museum. You may notice those forward guns are angled slightly, almost as if they're targeting something specific. And they are. They have a range of 12 miles. If they were fired today, they would score a direct hit on London Gateway services on the M1. So if you ever pass down the M1 need to stop somewhere, think twice before you get there. City Hall on our right, when the Greater London Authority was formed, they were an American-style organisation, wanted to give their headquarters an American-sounding name, so went for the very American-sounding City Hall. But the City of London was to the left of us, north of the river, and City Hall is to the right of us, south of the river, in the borough of Southwark. Yes, City Hall, technically, not even in a city. There, Sadiq Khan and his friends have now moved down the river to the Crystal near Greenwich, meaning that building sits vacant, empty, and without much of use. And we are now, of course, coming up to the world-famous Tower Bridge. I know you probably thought it was called London Bridge, but it isn't. This is Tower Bridge. Completed in 1894, even though it looks a lot older than that. In fact, the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City is even older than this one. There's a very good reason why it looks so old. I'll tell you why on the third trip. Like, this area of London we are now in, the old port of London, was becoming very congested. A new bridge was needed, had to be one that somehow opened up so the cargo ships could still come in. The chief architect at the time, a man named Sir Horace Jones, he held a bridge design competition. He looked at all the entries and he decided that the winner of that competition was Sir Horace Jones. I know, how very vain. In that competition there were spinning bridges like he decided to go for his own design of the Bastille Bridge. Bastille being a seesaw, describing how the road in the middle rises up. We are a few ways back to the people up in town. It's 5 years to luck. It's not London folklore that if you wave at someone on Tower Bridge, you get a wave back, you get 5 years of good luck. Dates back to the Victorian era when the sailors have set sail. That's the last place where their loved ones have waved them off. They went to sea for 5 years, and it's 5 years of good luck. For the old port of London in its heyday, busiest port anywhere in the world, Tower Bridge would have to rise 9,000 times a year to let the cargo ships through. It doesn't rise as much anymore, just what happens today. But if you do want to see it open up, you can Google Tower Bridge open time. Put the full timetable on there for you. River traffic still has right of way here in London. As long as any vessel provides 24 hours notice, Tower Bridge will always hold up road traffic and open up to let the ships through. Those walkways along the top used to be open to pedestrians, closed in 1910, found to be a hive of criminal activity. Lots of pickpockets, lots of muggings, lots of ladies of the night up there. And people also realised it wasn't worth the hassle of all the steps up, the walk across and all the steps back down again. They might as well just be patient and wait for the road to be lowered. Those walkways are now once again reopened though as part of the Tower Bridge experience. If you're not afraid of heights, the middle section of the floor is made of glass. You get to walk around the engine room, see all the machinery that raises and lowers the bascules. Tickets start from about £11.40 each for adults, well worth a visit if you get the chance. But why does Tower Bridge look so old? Well, this is in fact a steel structure in just one layer of stone cladding. And the reason why it looks so old is to blend in with this building on our right, the Tower of London. Now the Tower of London, known as a place for executions, whilst that is technically true, you had to be quite the VIP to be executed there. That was an honour reserved only for royals. If you were a mere commoner, you'd be executed on the nearby Tower Hill. And a public execution no less. And that is what Park was even back in the day. In fact, those public executions were so popular, they even set up a gift shop where you could buy the severed toes and fingers of the beheaded, a very pleasant souvenir. It was also used as a prison. Some famous prisoners include Catherine Howard, Guy Fawkes, the Cray twins as recently as 1951. King Edward V, he was only 12 years old and he was crowned king. His brother was only 10. After only a few months on the throne, they were imprisoned in the Tower by their uncle, the Duke of Gloucester, supposedly for their own safety, at which point they vanished, disappeared, never to be seen again, allowing their uncle to be crowned King Richard III. I think we're all coming to the same conclusion there. It has also been a royal mint, an observatory, a treasury, an armoury, a palace, a lighthouse. It was even a royal zoo for over 600 years, started up by King Henry III, because what the monarchs of the world liked to do back in his day was gift each other exotic animals. There were lions, there were zebras, there was a polar bear chained up swimming in the Thames, there was an elephant on a strict diet of red wine only under the orders of the King of Spain. Yeah, we didn't know what to do with these animals. So when the RSPCA were formed, they had the zoo closed down. The animals moved to a site in Regent's Park, forming the London Zoo that we have today. I've only scratched the surface on the history of the Tower of London, as a fascinating history dating back almost 1,000 years to the days of William the Conqueror. It's well worth a visit. If you get the chance to go along, you get to see the crown jewels. They are guarded by the beefeaters. Now, if you ask a beefeater very nicely, they'll be very happy to give you a tour of the tower for free. They are some of the best tour guides in the world, so do be sure to leave them a nice tip. If you do go along though, I will let you know now, the gift shop no longer sells fingers or toes. City of London skyscrapers on our right, you've got the gherkin, the scalpel, the cheese grater and the walkie-talkie. If you are not sure which buildings they are the ones that look like a gherkin, a scalpel, a cheese grater and a walkie-talkie. The building closest to us, the walkie-talkie, the top floor of that is home to the Sky Garden. You can go up there, walk around the plants, get a lovely view of the city. Best of all though, it is free to enter. Not something you hear a lot in London, so do make the most of that. Just got to book a time slot online and you can go along. A bit further along from those buildings, you can see the top of a stone column with a golden orb atop it. That's the monument to the Great Fire of London, 61 metres tall. If you laid it down on its side, from its base, the tip would reach the bakery in Pudding Lane where the fire started. Fire spread for 3 days in September 1666, destroyed about 80% of London, over 13,000 buildings. Didn't reach the nearby Tower of London though. The guards from the tower, they went around to the houses, they knocked on the doors and they said, well, your house is probably going to burn down anyway. Do you mind if we blow it up now so the fire can't spread to our lovely tower? How very nice for the people who live there. You can visit the monument today. It's about £5 to enter, 311 steps to the top. If you make it both up and down, they give you a certificate, which looks very impressive on a CV. You'll get a better view of the monument in a moment in between the buildings on the right. Whilst you look out for that, I'll start telling you about this rather grey and ugly bridge coming up ahead of us. A bridge so bland, you probably didn't even notice it going in the other direction, but that bland, grey and ugly bridge would in fact be the world famous London Bridge. I know, a bit disappointing, isn't it? It is the one the nursery rhymes about, it's the one Fergie sings about, it is the we don't even know which incarnation of London Bridge this is, there have been so many. First one built by the Romans in the middle of the 1st century, most famous one being medieval London Bridge, completed in 1209, had buildings on it as tall as 7 stories, had a church, had a drawbridge, had the heads of traitors stuck on a spike for everyone to see at the Southern Gatehouse. Needless to say, no longer a tourist attraction you can still see today. It was made up of 17 arches across the Thames, severely disrupted the flow of the river. It would mean in the winter months, the section of water we are about to enter would freeze over. To make the most of that, they'd hold ice skating and frost fairs on the ice. In fact, they once walked an elephant from the Tower of London Zoo from one side of the river to the other to show how thick and strong the ice was. On a diet of red wine, I highly doubt it would have been walking in a straight line. The red logo in the middle of the bridge, that's the logo of the Bridge House Trust. They were set up in the 13th century to look after London Bridge. For many hundreds of years, that was the only bridge across the Thames here in London. The boatmen who made their trade ferrying people up and down and across the river protested very strongly against the construction of any more bridges. They were worried they would lose out on their business. In fact, for many centuries, the River Thames was the main highway of London. It was the quickest, safest and easiest way to travel around the city. The narrow, winding roads were full of traffic, full of highwaymen as well. A very dangerous place to be. It was much quicker, safer and easier and faster to travel along the Thames instead. Nowadays, the Bridge House Trust also look after Blackfire Bridge, the Millennium Bridge and Tower Bridge. The medieval London Bridge, replaced by Victorian London Bridge, designed by architect Sir John Rennie and his son, also an architect, also confusingly named John Rennie. But in the 1960s, it was discovered their bridge was sinking into the riverbed. Yes, London Bridge really was falling down. So it was sold to an American entrepreneur and bridge enthusiast named Robert McCulloch. He had it shipped over to the USA, rebuilt over Lake Havasu in Arizona as part of a resort where it still stands today. So if you ever find yourself in Arizona, check out their London Bridge. It's far prettier than ours. Modern London Bridge, though, opened up in 1973 by Queen Elizabeth II. If you are a fan of ugly concrete bridges, don't worry, we've got you covered. We're about to pass underneath another one, this one being Cannon Street Railway Bridge. At one point known as Alexandra Bridge after Princess Alexandra of Denmark, there's not much more to say about this bridge except for the fact it is very, very ugly. The only thing of slight interest to some of you might be, if you look to your right, the windows underneath the bridge, they lead into a sauna. You may see people of the naked variety in there. That is fascinating stuff. Next windows along lead into a pub. If you see anyone naked in there, it means they've had one too many already. But from one very ugly bridge to one far more beautiful bridge coming up ahead of us, that is Southwark Bridge. 1921 example of Art Deco architecture. Still has its original gas lamps too. In fact, Southwark Bridge was so beautiful it was even used as a stand-in for London Bridge in the Mary Poppins film. As Walt Disney said, it was a far more beautiful bridge. Compared to London Bridge of today, yes, it certainly is more beautiful. But Southwark Bridge also has the nickname of the Lonely Bridge, as statistically it is the bridge across the Thames with the least amount of foot traffic. Doesn't really go from anywhere interesting to anywhere exciting. So if you can find anyone on that bridge to wave at, please do. They're probably very lost, very confused, probably been on that bridge for ages trying to find a way off of it. That man up there, no idea where he is. Coming back up to the Globe Theatre on the left, summer season of productions at the Globe is once again in full swing. Starts every year on the 23rd of April to commemorate Shakespeare's birthday. He also died on the 23rd of April, and you think you've had some bad birthday presents. You need a nice day for the Globe, as it is an open-air theatre after all. Tickets start from just £5 there for a spot in the standing area. Get to experience theatre Elizabethan style. It is home to a thrust stage, meaning the stage is visible from 3 out of its 4 sides by the audience, as Shakespeare intended when he wrote his plays. The next bridge coming up ahead of us, that is the Millennium Bridge. Remember that competition I mentioned earlier that the London Eye came second in? Well, this is what beat it to first place. To give it its official name, it's the Blade of Light. To give it its unofficial nickname, it is the Wobbly Bridge. And it earns that nickname because it literally was wobbly, from side to side by as much as about 6 inches. So bad, in fact, after being open for just 2 days, it was closed for 2 years whilst it was fixed and repaired. Had to get some help from NASA, who fitted it with dampers, which work a bit like car shock absorbers. Usually find them on buildings in earthquake zones around the world. When questioned about why his bridge wobbled, the architect who designed it, Lord Norman Foster, he said, "It's not my design that's the problem, it's the way you Londoners walk. You march everywhere." If you couldn't tell from that comment, Lord Norman Foster was not a Londoner, he was from the north of England. Has a few film credits to its name as well. Appears in the backgrounds of scenes set on the planet Xandar in the Marvel film Guardians of the Galaxy. Was even destroyed by Death Eaters at the start of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. To the right it leads to St Paul's Cathedral. To the left it leads to the old Bankside Power Station, the building with a 325-foot tall chimney. Designed by Sir Charles Gilbert Scott, who also designed its sister Battersea Power Station and the iconic red telephone box. Closed for its original purpose as it was causing far too much pollution. Reopened as the Tate Modern Art Gallery, boasts a very impressive collection of 20th and 21st century modern art. If modern art is not really your thing though, there's also a cocktail bar on the top floor. Maybe after a visit there, you'll appreciate the art a bit more. It is another free to enter attraction though, so once again do make the most of that. You can spend all day wandering around the Tate. I highly recommend it. A bit further along on the left, the glass building with the bump in the side, that is London's newest skyscraper, number 1, Blackfriars. We haven't got an official nickname for it yet, but there have been some suggestions such as the vase, the cocktail shaker, the boomerang, the baby bump and the Kim Kardashian. I'm sure she's flattered. It was built in response to a report that said there wasn't enough affordable housing in the area, so they built that, filled it with apartments and charged about £5 million each for them, because that is what affordable living in London is for you. Coming back up to the Blackfriars bridges now, on this side, Blackfriars Railway Bridge, the only train station in London to span the Thames. So if you're going to wait on any platform for a train in London, make it this one, as this is the one with the nicest view. There are in fact 2.5 Blackfriars bridges. In between the two full-size Blackfriars bridges, you will see that half a bridge. Mysterious red columns on your left, on your right. They belong to the old London, Chatham and Dover Railway Bridge. As steam trains became heavier, then replaced by diesel trains, the old bridge couldn't support the weight. Tried to demolish it, couldn't get rid of these columns. They were too well built into the riverbed. Dynamite would cause too much damage to the bridges on either side, so instead they just left them there, painted them red, gave them the Grade 2 listing, and just hoped no one would notice. Which is why we point them out on every cruise, every day, and encourage you to take lots of photographs of them. There they are, the massive red columns, completely inconspicuous as we pass by. Whatever you do, just don't notice them. You think you can see a building with the word OXO written on the side of it, and I'm afraid I would have to tell you, technically, you would be wrong. Yes, the red and white building on the left, it used to belong to the OXO Stock Meat Cube Company, but when they built that tower in the 1920s, advertising on the Thames was banned. The River Thames is a royal highway, advertising on a royal highway is illegal. You cannot subject the King or the Queen to advertising, as they will spontaneously combust. So when they built that tower, they were taken to court. They hired a very smart lawyer, came up against a very stupid judge, and the lawyer argued that tower doesn't say OXO, those are just shapes. A circle, a cross and another circle. And it is a complete coincidence that at night they are lit up in the company colour of red. Like I say, very smart lawyer, very stupid judge, they managed to get away with it. We're going to talk about something very glamorous now. We're going to get some good stuff, and that glamorous good stuff would be raw sewage. Yeah, so in the 19th century, population of London boomed. There was more human waste, more animal waste, more industrial waste being dumped in the Thames. Because that is just where you threw your waste back in the day, straight into the river. As you can imagine, didn't smell too good, wasn't very healthy. Reached a peak in the summer of 1858. There was a very hot heat wave, very low tide, caused all that raw sewage on the riverbed to ferment, leading to what we know as the Great Stink. The smell was unbearable. What else was happening at that time? Well, Parliament were getting ready to move into the new Palace of Westminster, but they just couldn't do it because of how bad the smell was. Like most problems, they're only solved once they start becoming inconvenient to politicians, so they hired an engineer named Sir Joseph Bazalgette to come along and design a sewage system. And he did. It is hidden underneath that area on the right, which we call the Victoria Embankment. He built the sewage pipes, diverted the waste away from the river to a place where it could be processed, also narrowed the Thames, used to be much wider here at this point. By doing that, it helps make the Thames the cleanest urban river in the world. I know, doesn't look it, does it? But what actually gives the Thames the, I don't even know what colour you want to call that colour, is the mud and the clay on the riverbed. The Thames is a tidal river, rises and lowers by 20 feet twice a day. There's a strong undercurrent that goes at 6 knots an hour, faster than any human can swim. That's why it's a very bad and dangerous idea to go swimming in the Thames, so please don't do it. But it means the mud and the clay doesn't have a chance to settle, instead it just gets churned about, gives the Thames the, I'm going to go for murky green colour that we have today. Along the embankment on the right, you'll see some decorative green lion heads. You'll see some more on the other side of the Wellington. They were used by the Victorians as a flood detection system. They could see where the top of the water was in relation to the lion heads, decided it was time to get their Wellington boots on. To describe how this worked, they came up with a little rhyme that goes like this. If the lions are drinking, then London is sinking. But if the lions are ducked, then London is. Yeah, I'll let you finish that one off. Somerset House on the right, the building with the green dome atop it, has had many purposes in its lifetime. Was home to the Navy Board during Nelson's time. He even received his orders for Trafalgar from inside of there. Was known as the Hatcham, Matcham and Dispatcham building, as it is where the birth, marriage and death certificates, firmly signed in that order, of everyone in the country was kept in an archive. These days it's home to an art gallery, various events going on throughout the year such as open air cinemas and ice rinks. You can see there's currently a Ferris wheel set up there at the moment, a big wheel in London. It will never catch on. But we're coming back up to Waterloo Bridge now, made out of very clever material called Portland stone. The reason why it's very clever is because it's self-cleaning. Every time it rains, the bridge gives itself a wash. Believe me, it rains a lot here in London. It is a very, very clean bridge. On the way out, I said it was known as Ladies Bridge as it was built by women. So I'll tell you about a building coming up on the right on the other side of the bridge that sounds like it was built by men, the Shelmex building. And I say it sounds like it was built by men because when they built it, they were insecure about the size of their clock. So the Shelmex building on the right, built for the Shell Petrol Company in the 1930s. They wanted to put a clock on the front of it. They were competing with the most famous clock in the world a bit further up the river, the one on the Elizabeth Tower. You know, the one you thought was called Big Ben, turns out it's just called Clock Tower. No, it's called the Elizabeth Tower. Big Ben's just the name of the bell on the inside. Very confusing, but yes, that one. That one has a diameter of 7 metres. Clock on the Shelmex building is 7.6 metres, meaning it is still the largest clock face in the UK today. As it was built for the Shell Petrol Company, it was given the nickname of Big Benzene, which is a joke for people who understand chemistry, which I do not. But between the Shelmex building and Waterloo Bridge on the right, that building with the one flagpole and the green roof, that is the Savoy Hotel, London's first purpose-built luxury hotel, first building in London to be illuminated with electric lights, and the first building in London to use electric lifts as well. If you were to have a dinner party at the Savoy Hotel, it is considered very, very bad luck to only have 13 guests. So the hotel would provide you with a 14th guest, and that guest is a ceramic cat named Casper. And on our right, we have the oldest thing we will see on the cruise today, an Egyptian obelisk, 3,500 years old. It's known as Cleopatra's Needle, despite being 1,000 years older than Cleopatra herself. In fact, it is so old, when it was built, woolly mammoths were still roaming the earth. But I am going to shock you, we didn't steal it. It was actually a gift to us from the Egyptian government in 1818. And it was a gift that we loved so much, we waited 60 years before we tried to move it over here. Because how do you move a 20-ton obelisk? Well, you lay it on its side, put it in a steel tube, then roll it into the water to be towed to London. There was a storm in the Bay of Biscay. The tow ropes had to be cut. It was left adrift at sea for almost a year until it was finally found, put in its final resting place there on the embankment. It's guarded by 2 sphinxes. Now, sphinxes are supposed to be looking away from what they are guarding to be, you know, effective guards. But those ones are looking towards the needle, meaning they're either protecting us from the obelisk or the Victorians just didn't really know what they were doing. Yeah, probably the latter. Coming back up to the Golden Jubilee bridges now. When these were built, they were a bit worried about coming across any unexploded World War II bombs on the riverbed. They were very cautious. They dug the foundations out by hand, presumably using miners who could hold their breath for a very long time. But as we are about to pass back underneath them, that means this is your final chance to wave at a stranger, so do make the most of that. If you have got a wave back from anyone today, I can guarantee they are a tourist, as us Londoners are far too miserable for anything fun like that. There we go. Everyone on the left are tourists, everyone on the right, miserable commuter. The cranes on the right, they are working on the Victorian sewage system. Sir Joseph Bransford sewage system was built for London when it had a population of 1 million. The population of London is now almost 9 million, which means we're upgrading to a super sewer, getting bigger sewage pipes to move around all that increased level of waste. It just goes to show 200 years later, us Londoners really are still full of it. The building behind those cranes is Whitehall Court, named after the old Whitehall Palace I mentioned earlier that Henry VIII moved into. A huge palace stretched all the way from where we are now to where the Houses of Parliament are today. Home to the monarchy for 168 years, until one night a maid was drying a bedsheet over a fire. The fire spread into the sheet, then throughout the rest of the building, almost completely destroying it with the exception of one part, the banqueting house, which these days is open up as a museum, located behind the Ministry of Defence, building on the right with the green roof. Now we are about to begin our docking procedure, so please do remain seated. I'll let you know once it's safe to stand, but for the time being, please do remain seated. So the Ministry of Defence building on the right with the green roof, we refer to it as the iceberg.
Okay.